you're tech savvy already.
Oh, wonderful. Hi.
Hi. Have you met Misty before?
I haven't. I do know of you though, Misty, but I have never had the pleasure of meeting you. So hi, it's nice to see you
Hi,
here.
and same. I'm so excited to meet you in person because, well, in person, because
Yeah.
I followed your work for years upon years and just told everybody how great you are, and yet we've never met.
Oh,
So
well,
it's
we have
it's
to
nice to
rectify
be
that.
doing this.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, so I like
Thank
what you were
you.
saying before this. I was listening up to, how you're just throwing people in at the deep end and letting them sink or swim basically in that class. And it's so interesting for me to hear that because back in the day when I first started Pilates, my first teacher was Alan Herdman way back in 1982. And that's
Okay.
exactly what he did. What I see in the Pilates world today is there's so much sort of preciousness, right? You've got to be able to
Hmm.
put your rib cage here over your pelvis and get it down and put it, and no one is moving. And I remember that very first lesson I had with Alan. I'd never seen the Pilates equipment in my life, right? He had this little studio on Edgware Road in London. And I walked down the basement stairs and he looked at me and he goes, "Oh yeah, you're willowy. I know what to do with you." And he threw me literally on the reformer and said, "Do this." And then he walked away. So I did whatever he told me to do. And then he came back a few minutes later and he said, "Okay, do this." And then he walked away again. And that was my lesson for years. And if I didn't know what I was doing by
Years.
like the third or fourth lesson, then he would put the onus on me. It's like, "Why haven't you got this yet?" So, it's like, but what that taught me to do was to be, like you were saying, really present in the moment and try and figure it out for myself. And I've never lost it because I had to do it for myself. And so it was interesting to hear you talk about, like being this guiding light the whole way and always having to be there for these people. I mean, surely the end result is that you can do this at home. You don't need us, after a while. So anyway, my
Right.
2 cents worth
No,
for that.
Agreed.
agreed. And it's funny, right? Because like it's almost like we want to just dismiss that as, well, that was back in the day. And or to say people are soft today, so we can't do that anymore. So I hate to
Well,
like it, there's so much that's in that, because I mean people are in such a different space today.
yes.
And I think that even for my people this morning, I didn't just throw them into deep end. I've taken years teaching them how to
Yeah,
swim before
and
Right,
throwing them into
yes,
deep end,
I
right?
right.
apologize for
So
that comment,
no,
but
no, no,
yeah.
it's fine. But I mean, I think that sense of um, getting a sense of understanding where a person is at, regardless of whether it takes a year or a week. If you could have walked in as a strong, able-bodied person, you could have a rugby player walking in your door right now who has never seen Pilates, and you could just decide to crush them, and they'll be fine,
Yeah.
right? So I mean,
I
there's
think
something to be said
though,
for that balance, right?
as you said, it's a balance, it's a fine line, but you never know where someone's limit is until you push it, right? And you don't know where your limit is until you go for it. So I think we've become a little bit too soft. It's like we're not enabling our clients to test those limits for themselves, right? I mean, we're obviously, I don't think anyone's died from Pilates class yet. So I think we are in a relatively safe space to be able to allow our clients to do that. But it's the classes that I personally go to. And again, I understand people starting out and they're not very experienced as teachers and they're going by the book. But after a while, you just have to let that go and you've got to allow people to move. And I feel a lot of times that's not really happening because there's, a modification put in place before the movement is allowed. And then all that body is learning is the modification and not the movement. So anyway.
I think too, though, I think the softness, perhaps, just speculation, has come because I do believe that there has been a languaging and a messaging problem in some of this, the aggressiveness, if you can't do it, you're not XYZ, that did exist in some places within the community back in the day. That did need to go, right? There's
Absolutely.
no reason to be aggressive or abusive with a client or anybody else. But I think that people looked at that change and perhaps just thought more broadly about softening things to a point where a lot of the work can be considered to be precious. You know, one of the things I say all the time is that we can't, it's not our jobs as the teachers to define a student's limits.
Yeah.
You know, they have to come to those walls. Now, if we see someone's head's about to fly off of their neck, you know, perhaps we should intervene.
Of
But,
course.
you know, we keep them safe, we do all of the right things, but we have to let them trust their choices, trust their bodies. Yeah.
Totally. And it's not being soft, as you say. I think it is the vocabulary. You can still get the end result with the change in how we're actually now talking. Because, you know, I went to a British ballet school. I know all about being abused with language and shaming and blaming. But I also do, and you know, with any kind of change, there's always going to be that extreme, right? We're all going to go over here to make sure it's all okay before we all come back to that balance in the center again. So what I'm seeing now is that change happening in our Pilates world, so that we are swinging and we're kind of coming back into this more balanced approach. But you know, some of this nitpicking has to go, though. It's just like, you know, just breathe and just go through the movement and allow that body to adapt to that movement over time.
Yes.
You know, so
couple comments here that just came through here. So and applies Amsterdam saying, I've been thinking about my clients and pushing them. They have to feel safe in order to push their limits. And then the second comment was Oh, sorry. I'll drop a second comment and then you can go for it, Caroline.
Yeah.
Safe and comfortable don't have to be the same thing. Great discussion.
Those are good words, safe and comfortable. I don't think change happens unless you're uncomfortable. But I don't see anyone who goes into the Pilates world as a teacher who doesn't instinctively create a safe environment. There are very, very few Pilates instructors I've seen that are abusive. I mean, I've been all over the world and done this. So I think we're safe in that respect. I just do think a little bit of the vocabulary, especially around women's health, which is my thing, that vocabulary needs to change. But I totally agree with that comment about safe and comfortable aren't necessarily.
Sorry, I was just thinking with the safe thing too. The safe can be also self-serving if you want to be real about it. Because if my class isn't safe, you're not coming back. You're not renewing. You're not going to put money in my pocket anymore. So that safety doesn't even necessarily have to be about the person's safety in terms of them feeling. Just making sure they feel good enough to return can be our mindset sometimes too.
Yeah.
Well, but psychological safety matters.
Absolutely.
And I do think that there are a lot of Pilates teachers who have either come from other modalities of fitness or, you know, maybe when they entered Pilates, they entered, you know, through a place where anything went in terms of messaging and language. I do think there's a lot of unsafe language out there in Pilates. I'm not saying that it's intentional. There's a difference. But again, we now have access to all kinds of conversations and stories, and we have reason to take a look at how we present the work and our experience and how it affects the people that are in the space. So when I think of safety, physical safety, I think is the easy part. Because like Martin said, I'm not going to go back to a place where all the springs are bent and, you know, one of the reformers is up on blocks. Instead, I'm going to leave as fast as possible, but I may not notice as a person that's new to the environment, things that are being said that make me feel icky. I may not consciously notice that, but over time, it may start to take its toll. And especially, Carolyne, with what you do in women's health, I've seen a lot of very bad languaging affect people very negatively.
Sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
We're very careful in one of the, you know, the big components of my courses is talking about vocabulary. How are you speaking to that woman? How are you talking to her postpartum? You're saying, we're going to get your body back. we're not getting anything back. And it's really hard to see postpartum women struggle, you know, with their own body image, and then have the teacher say, well, now look at this, we're just going to have to do something about this. It's like, that's one of the first things that we talk about in teaching women's health, is like, no shaming, no blaming. You know, it's not about your weight, it's not about how you look. So that is slowly changing, and again, it's about making that woman feel safe within that body that is changing so much, you know. And as women, we change all the time. We go through all these different stages, and so every single stage has to now be normalized, and it has to have vocabulary around it where it's supportive of that change. And everybody will, you know, I would like it to be more about, you'll be fine at the end of this. This is just another change. It's like, you know, I see so much now, there's a trend now for menopause, right? It's like all of a sudden we've woken up to menopause. And while I'm so appreciative of the fact that more and more people are opening up to some of the stresses and the strains of going through menopause, it's like somebody said, you know, being comfortable. You're not comfortable when you're going through menopause. No change is comfortable. And I was hoping to see with this new trend that some of the language would have changed around menopause to be a little bit more positive, because it's hard to go through. But I don't want everybody to then start talking about all the negativity about going through menopause as it has been in the past, right? So again, we come back to vocabulary. How can we change how we're talking about what we're doing, right? We've got to learn a different language in today's world.
For sure. So, Karen, can you give me an example of some of the vocabulary, some of the, for lack of a better, faulty vocabulary that people are just kind of fall into around
with menopause? I can talk a little bit about that, because I started all of my courses, and this is where the business people will be like, what, you didn't have a 5-year plan and lay it all out? I'm like, no, every time I went through a change, I was like, I'm going to write about this. So when I went through menopause, and at this age, I very often lose my train of thought. So you have to pull me back into this. But when I started talking about menopause and then starting to build my own course for it, this is about 2010, I think. There was very little research back there. There was very little that was available. And so everything that I was looking at research-wise was so negative. My God, you are going to have headaches and your skin is going to droop and you're just going to be, and it was just like, oh.
Doom and
so
gloom.
I tried, it was just like, my goodness, now you made me feel so much worse than I already feel, because I don't know what's going on in my body. All I need is an understanding of what's happening, and then I'll be able to cope. I don't need you to tell me that I'm feeling lousy. I've got that, right? So I try to make it a little bit more positive and make it like a sense of humor, right? So, you know, so you don't have a sex drive when you're going through all of these, and maybe I don't know whether I should say this. It's like, well, maybe you should look at your partner before you look at yourself, because it's always blaming the woman. My God, you know, you don't have estrogen and progesterone, and therefore you're the one to blame for the low sex drive. And I'm like looking at everybody's partners, and I'm thinking, maybe the partners are not so attractive anymore. Why is it always our fault, right? So instead of sort of being negative about that, it's like, what can we do positive? What can we do about this, right? So to put a spin on that, I'm like, oh my God, here I am. I'm never having a period again. There's absolutely no chance of me ever getting pregnant. So what the hell? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have, you know, great sex. And so trying to put a spin on it, not that everybody goes out there and starts having great sex. I mean, that's not the thing, but the thing is to always
that's still got like 50 hearts at the same time.
I mean, I wouldn't knock it.
I know, it's like, here's all your droopy skin when you go through menopause. I mean, in one of my manuals, I have this picture of a very dejected woman looking down with a sad face, and I've got all these arrows going, my God, here are your droopy boobs or your droopy butt, or, you know, it's like, oh my God. Okay, so what has happened here? Again, it's understanding what's going on with your body, right? So it's not, you've got to go out there and you've got to kick butt and you've got to go lift these weights because you've got to get your body back
Lift
into this
everything.
toned
Yes.
whatever, right?
Right.
It's like there's nothing wrong with your muscles, girls. All you've lost are your fat deposits, which are supporting your skin, right? So your fat deposits underneath your abs, in your glutes, you've now lost those fat deposits because you don't have estrogen anymore. But here's the good thing, right? Because you don't have your female hormones, or they're lower, what's happening in your body is your androgens are now increasing, your testosterone. What does that mean? That means you can now, probably for the first time in your life, build your muscle. So you want that ass? You can build the muscle for that ass. You don't have to then buy into this, oh my God, I'm menopausal and I'm so droopy and, you know, everything's just going to go to hell in a handbasket. Again, it's just understanding what is happening to your body and then giving women possibilities of coping with that, right? No, you're never going to look 20 again, but you can look the best 50 you've ever looked, because you can still do things with this amazing body that we have that's going to make you look and feel better. You know, so it's just lack of information out there. It's lack of the correct language for women. It's always shame and blame the woman. My God, look at you've gone through menopause. It's the end of your life. Blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, well, still standing, going through the next 3 phases of my life.
And I think if we take a look at, you know, again, the resilience of women, the messaging has been so bad and so negative about everything related to women for so long. Your boobs aren't big enough. They're too big. They're too high. They're too low. Where is your ass? Oh, well, you can't fill up those jeans. Go get a BBL. You know, all of these other things that we do and drive women through. I do feel like that aspect of it is starting to turn the bend, but it'll be a very, very slow turn.
Absolutely.
And I think this is another place where we as fitness people drop the ball, because if we look at the imaging in studios, even if we're seeing more diversity, we still aren't seeing a whole lot of age diversity.
No.
And when we're looking at it, my client base is primarily 45 plus. Why wouldn't I have pictures, testimonials, etc., from people who are 45 plus in my space? Why wouldn't I? So I think that we can really steer this conversation without words, even just start to show people in their 50s, 60s, 70s living their best lives.
Absolutely.
And then we attach the story.
Absolutely.
But we don't.
It's one of the reasons why, you know, with this pivoting, you know, that we all had to do in the pandemic, I then took all my courses and I put them online. And I was going to get a model to do the videos, because I'm like, oh, you know, I'm 63, I'm good, my body's like this, my face is like this. And I was like, wait a minute, no, I'm going to do all these videos. And yes, you can see what I look like as a 63-year-old woman. And then I want you to look at how I'm moving for a 63-year-old woman. I'm going to take all of that away. And it's like, if you don't like what I look like, I don't care. But watch how I move. Because then I want to get that across as a woman. It's like, your life hasn't ended because you don't look like a 20-year-old after you've had your baby. But understand that, again, I go back to this education and understanding your female body. Know that you can have a superb body that moves, okay? I'm not talking about looks, but how you can move through all these different stages of your life. So I'm hoping by doing my videos myself, that I'm kind of breaking that. It's like, my videos are not all of this, you know, hey, you know, look at me, I'm in my tank top with my boobs falling out the top and I look great and all. It's like, here I am with my long sleeve shirt on, with my long pants, and I'm going to show you how to move. And, you know, never mind. So it's still tough, you know, because I'm still also dealing with societal expectations and stuff. But it's like, then where do you start? You know,
someone has to take the lead.
There's one of my colleagues when I was working on the shopping channel, Rosalie Brown. So she's in her 50s and she's a fitness, like she sells products and she's an instructor and stuff. And we had a host come on. I'm not going to say her name, but really small body and, you know, all kinds of surgeries done. And then people were meanly picking on her, saying, oh, look at her, this, that, the other. And then Rosalie Brown interrupted and says, but you can't fake movement.
Exactly.
And she's like, this lady moves wonderfully and she demonstrates exercise wonderfully. So it doesn't matter what she's done to her body, whatever makes her feel good. I'm not going to judge any of that because you can't fake movement. And she moves really well. And I think it's when, much like with racism, when we interrupt the conversation and get people to think differently about it, I think that's where these things start.
Yeah.
So for Rosalie Brown to be like, to stop everyone and be like, you can't fake movement, then it's like, okay, well, let's esteem movement higher than physical appearance. Let's esteem her physical abilities more than her age. Those sort of things. So it just changes what we esteem as the highest thing on the pecking order.
Right.
Well, let's
But why
just
can't
take people for who they are and where they are. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Can we stop
Yes.
judging, especially women?
Yes.
The dad bod is super cool right now. Every guy's got a dad bod and it's great, but let a woman have a mom bod and everybody wants to rip her to shreds. Screw that. Stop judging women for what's on the surface. Enough. We should be beyond that.
Oh my God.
We should not be judging women, period. I got a little bit upset. I'm better now.
No, you have to get upset. This has to happen, right? We can't all be on our best behavior all the time because then nothing happens. It's like, I mean, people who've done my live courses know that I then go off on a tangent. Somebody just has to ask me one question that will lead us to a different conversation, and I am on my soapbox. Because, I mean, it's like, I'm sorry. You just got to
I'm with you 100%. I will stand with you on that soapbox because it's got to change, and we're the worst on ourselves.
Absolutely.
I frequently find that men, you put them in their spot about it and then they get better. But women will tear women down. They will call them names. They will talk about whatever. And then they'll be mad when somebody does it to them. Like, we have to do better. We have to support women.
I love that, Misty, that you're saying that. I went on a limb yesterday and I said something with Piercy and Everly in the room. Everly was talking about how she has to, like, she stretches before she does it, demonstrates a dance move, and then the courage to go out there and to do these things. And I said to her, and I was kind of like, should I say it or should I not say it? And I said to her, like, I commend you for the courage to put your stuff out there because guys don't care what other guys think, but women can be mean sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the fact that you went out there and put that stuff out there. And she's like, thank you so much for saying that. Meanwhile, I was thinking, like, I don't know if people are going to receive me saying that women can be mean. And she's like, no, thank you. It does take a lot. I have to get myself hyped up to put out a post because I know that it's the women who are going to come after me.
100%. It's always, if you look at the Pilates police in the chats, it's always the women.
But that's just such a that brings to the fore, I think, that women are so insecure, and we've been made that way, right, by what's expected of in society. And so when you're hurt, you're going to go out there and you're going to hurt somebody else, right? You don't know anything else.
Hurt people.
So it's bringing it back to maybe first of all changing the vocabulary. That's really such a passion of mine. It's like, what do I speak in my classes? How do I speak to my women? So they start to come off that high alert, that hyper vigilant, what's she going to say about my body? Oh my God. And then class after class, when no one's made any comment about anybody's body, then there's a visual, you can feel that kind of, okay, I'm here with this body and no one's judging this body. And so that's how I see it building. And then maybe we can start changing it where women start to feel a little bit more confident out there in the world with whatever body they have, whatever face they have, whatever size bra cup they have or whatever. It's like, come on, this needs to stop already.
We have to stop it.
We have to stop it. Women have to stop it. And we have to stop it right now.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you've got some comments there. That's funny. I'm not going to comment on the comment. I'm like, okay.
No. Can I circle back to Martin Guda's comment here when you mentioned the dad bod? I was going to say something. I actually have a dad bod story too, but I'll put Guda's comment here first. He said, I don't know. As a man with a dad bod, I'm also hurt when people criticize my boobs due to a societal expectation, due to societal expectations. But once they see me moving, it's silence.
I get that. But when I'm talking about it, I'm talking kind of more broadly in the media perspective. And if you watch movies these days, you know, back in the day, it was all the Brad Pitts, the sculpted, whatever. Now it's cool to have middle-aged, not so bright, generally white guys of, we'll call them modest physical appearance. And they're in commercials and they are in videos and they're in all these places.
Yes.
But you don't get women that same latitude. You might have one or two women that are considered to be less than desirable, but they're considered to be that way because their appearance is brought down to still accentuate the dad bodishness of the other guy. It's
Right.
this constant foil. Even in dad bodishness, the women are, I just make bodishness. But
Hashtag it. Heard it here first.
women are still put in a place where they are scrutinized under the thumb.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, Misty, to that point, when you do see someone, a female with a certain body type that's atypical from what you see in the media, they've been casted that way.
Yes.
My wife was the very first one to say that. You ever watch like a cruise line commercial and then the mom's in this perfect little two-piece with her 4 children running around on the cruise line?
Right.
Everybody on the cruise line looks like that?
No.
Like, you know what I mean?
No.
So that's the sort of thing. So like when they do cast it, it's intentional. It's in a commercial that is trying to be inclusionary in their approach, but that's still not mainstream. That's someone being intentional with that messaging. It's still not mainstream.
Right. Right. It's not representative of what society really is.
It's still not representative.
And then when you do put a larger size person on a bicycle, then the comments are, oh my God, that's so wonderful. It's like, let's normalize this. Anybody can be on a bicycle.
That's the vocabulary piece.
You know,
right.
it's just like,
well said.
Why shouldn't she be on a bicycle? I don't know. It's just, you know, I've been every different shape, size. I've been really fat and I've been really thin and I've been everything in between. So I can identify with all of this. And it's like, through all of those different stages of my life, I could still move. So why don't people talk about my movement instead, right? Instead of all of this other stuff.
Yes.
I don't see change happening very fast from my perspective. I mean, I've been teaching for over 40 years and it still feels like you're pushing this rock up a hill.
Yes.
Well, and I don't think change happens fast because, as you said earlier, when you first got here, people don't want to be uncomfortable. And so they're going to do whatever they can to hang on to the status quo so that the change does not blow back to affect them. And it takes usually a big event for somebody to just really wholeheartedly lean into that change. You know, I've known people that I've danced with who, you know, now at our more advanced ages, have gotten injured, had major injuries, gained a lot of weight. And now they can talk about what it is to live in a fuller body and how hard that is. And, you know, how they've had to make adjustments on airplanes or whatever. But before, they didn't give that experience any time or any space because one, it wasn't theirs, and two, they may have even echoed some of the negativity that went along with that. So,
yes, judge
you
not
know,
lest you be judged.
And it's nature for us to stereotype and judge. I completely get that. But what does it take to catch that in ourselves and say, you know what? It's easy for me to say this. What if I say something different?
Yes. And that's the first step. Take a breath before you speak.
Or maybe 10 breaths. Maybe take a walk. Have a shot. Whatever you need to do. Fix it.
Yes. Fix it.
Fix it.
So we've talked about menopause for 42 minutes around it. I wanted to touch on diastasis recti and vocabulary around that.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's getting out of hand, right? More and more people are having, I see more and more people with a diastasis recti, and I've been working with that for over 25 years now. And back when I first started with that condition, there's no name for it, right? I couldn't find a name for what I was looking at. So I saw the condition first, and then I had to go and find out what the name of the condition was. But to cut a long story short, because it is a very long story, again, with anything that we find out about, we go to extremes, right? So one of the things I'm finding is that now all of a sudden everybody is thinking that they have a diastasis, and that's just not true. You've got to learn what the actual diagnosis is. And as Pilates instructors, we really can't do that. We can see a gap, we can assume, but we cannot diagnose and we can't prescribe. We can just do movement, right? And there's so much you can do with movement and myofascial release and breath work that can help that condition. But did you have an actual question about it, Martin? Sorry, I tend to
No,
just go off.
no, I just love hearing you just go off on it because it just flows out of your passion. So I'll lean back and let you talk.
Well, one of the things that
I have a question.
Yes,
Oh, question.
please.
So yes, I agree with you 100% because now we can't allow people to move when we're making the mere assumption that this is what's going on with them. But I'd like to know what your thoughts on this are, Carolyne. It seems like teachers are less likely to assume it of men. And so they push male clients a little bit harder when if they saw the very same presentation in a woman, they would say, oh, I can't move her because she has a diastasis. Can you talk about diastasis in men and the rest of it?
Absolutely. So when I first started with diastasis recti, it was always assumed to be a female problem, right? And again, always a problem, not a consequence of something else that's happened, right? So again, vocabulary, blaming the woman for a condition that she has no control over. So it was being recognized in pregnant and postpartum women. And so then it was assumed that because of the pregnancy, women were presenting with a diastasis recti. So what that was doing was limiting the condition to being a condition of pregnancy, which it absolutely is not, right? And it's not. Yeah. And so there's some research out there, and I think somebody posted a little while ago saying it's 60% of pregnant women. I was like, thank you, because the whole consensus has been 100% of pregnant women are going to have a diastasis recti. And I was like, well, that's simply not true. I've been teaching this population for 30 years. I've seen maybe 3 diastases during pregnancy. So, again, it's like research is research, and you have to understand that research is always evolving and it's always going to change. But you've got to focus on the actual condition. Now, I'll bring myself back to this. So we concentrated on pregnant women and then postpartum women. And what did that diastasis look like postpartum? How big was that gap? That was all that we were concentrating on. It's like trying to get that gap back together again. But now we understand so much more about what the condition actually is. And so the condition is a fascial condition, right? So it's an overstretching, very simply put, an overstretching of the linea alba. And because we now know more about fascia and all the connections throughout the body, it's like if you overstretch your linea alba, then chances are that your fascial system all throughout your body is also compromised at this point. So in my mind, the diastasis recti is the end result of dysfunctions that have been going on for a while. And the end result is that your fascia just has had enough and it's just gone. So once we look at that condition from a purely fascial standpoint, then we understand that anybody can have it, right? Men, women, children, whatever, because it's a fascial condition, and men also have fascia, just like men also have pelvic floors. Because for a while there, it was like, men don't have pelvic floors, we just have a couple of balls. I'm like, yeah, and they're connected to a few muscles. So once we look at that condition from a fascial standpoint, we have to then look at how we can regain the tensioning of the fascia that has now been overstretched. And the research is still out on whether you can actually do that if you have overstretched your fascia, right? So again, I always come at it from a point of view from being female, with our female hormones and going through pregnancy and, you know, postpartum. And if you're telling a postpartum woman who has maybe a 5-finger gap in her stomach, and the way to measure whether, you know, the severity of the diastasis is really how springy the fascia is underneath your fingers, never mind how many fingers the gap is. But if you're then telling that postpartum woman that, you know, once that fascia is stretched to a certain amount, you're never going to get it back again. Oh my God, you know, what is she then supposed to do? But there's so much you can do. I mean, when you're looking at a postpartum woman who has had this enormous drop of her estrogen and progesterone, and she's trying to get back into balance. If she's breastfeeding, her fascia system is going to be a little bit softer anyway, because she still has that increase in the female hormones. And the female hormones in and of themselves, the estrogen and progesterone, create a little bit more biotensegrity through that fascia. And I'm probably not saying all this in the correct way, and all the fascial people in here will go, no, that's not right, but just bear with me, okay? It's just the simplest way to say all this. So during pregnancy, your body is actually adapting to the increase in the hormones by becoming a lot more supple. But supple doesn't mean that you're becoming unstable and lax. You're becoming more supple, which means that you still have this give, right? Yes. And then it would be, for me, the diastasis recti then happens not because of the pregnancy itself, but because of what is happening in the outside environment, just like it would in a man, for instance, right? So if you've got a man who has a beer gut and he's decided, and so now I'm talking about one of my clients very early on in my career, one of my clients got up one morning and said to himself that he was going to get into shape, he was going to lose the weight he had a big beer gut. He was going to leave his wife. I'm like, I don't need to know that. And then he was going to come to Pilates to get fit, right? So he didn't come to me for Pilates. He came because he developed a diastasis recti. So this is important, right? He developed a diastasis recti. So he's got a beer gut. He's going into doing Pilates. It's no disrespect or offense here, but he goes to a very classical Pilates studio where they follow, you know, the 100 and the roll up and everything. And so there's all of this flexion of the torso into someone who isn't quite sure how to connect through the core yet, right? So basically they're bracing, they're using a huge breath, they're pushing into that fascial system, they're going into flexion. There's all this pressure behind the rectus sheath, behind all that fascia, just like in pregnancy. And then lo and behold, the tipping point, those muscles are separated, right? So anyone can get it. Because I'm a movement person, I always have to come from that perspective. I think a lot of times the way we're doing the exercises can cause the environment for the diastasis to happen. Not when you do flexion of the torso, you will have a diastasis. Everybody's different, right? So people can keep doing all the flexion and not have a diastasis. I do want to say, and I teach this in my course, I have a photo of a younger Pilates and an older Pilates, and you can see how his diastasis has developed over time. All right, so yes, and we all know how he was. Oh, let's do that roll up. So to answer your question about, you know, I will push my man more than I will push my woman. Yes, you can do that. One, because of the hormonal levels in a man, right? So a man can adapt to a little bit more of a workout, even though he has the diastasis, because his fascial system and his muscles are going to be that much stronger. Now, a woman with her fascial system, and the research is still being done about the effect of the female hormone on the fascial system, but we all know at certain times during the month when we have a period and we have an increase in our female hormones, how many people come in and say to you, oh my God, my body's all over the place today, and you say, well, do you have a period, right? So it has an effect on the fascial system. So with a female who has a diastasis recti, yes, you're probably going to be a little bit more safe with her exercise in the beginning. But with all diastasis recti, you have to go from that rehabilitative state to a more progressive movement, to more progressive exercises, to loading it, because you've got to get that person back into being functional. You can't then shut everything down and say you can never do flexion of the torso again because you have diastasis recti. That's not solving any problems, right? So again, it comes into this, how do you teach men and women? Do you have to teach them differently? Of course you do. We have different hormone levels that have different effects on our bodies, that should necessitate a slightly different way of teaching things.
Yes. And there's a comment here. It makes me curious, the research on how menopause then affects the fascia condition.
So when we lose our estrogen and our progesterone, we are going to have a slightly drier, again, I'm not using the correct vocabulary. I can already hear the knocking on the door from the fascial people.
Oh no.
And can I just do a little plug here so that people know where to go? So hopefully this time next year, Sneha Krishna and I, who's my faculty in India, and she's also presenting at the British Fascial Symposium, we're writing a book together about the diastasis recti and pelvic floor dysfunction and the fascial system. So it'll all be in this book, right?
There you go.
But to answer the question on menopause, yes, once you start losing your estrogen and progesterone, now estrogen and progesterone are very hydrating hormones, right? So it allows your fascial system to glide a little bit better. Then as you lose that, yes, your fascial system is going to start to get a little bit stickier and drier, and you're going to feel a little bit stiffer, and your joints are going to be stiffer. But what's going to counteract that? Movement. Okay, and specifically a kind of rocking movement that's going to start oiling and juicing your fascia again. We've got to stop thinking about the aging process of being a death penalty here. It really isn't. It's learning about your body and then changing with your body, right? Your workout that you did when you were 20 is not going to work for you when you're in your menopause time. No, neither is your diet, right? You've got to change. That's what it's all about. It's change. And when you go with that change, your life is going to be so much easier rather than resisting it all the time.
Agreed.
Indeed.
I've just seen a friend of mine come in from Malaysia, so I'm Malaysian. So I'm just going to say hi to Yasmin Yusof, all the way from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, my hometown.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, hello.
Yes, and this has gone so fast. I mean, it's like 55 already. That is like,
oh my God,
not fair. There's so many more questions.
Too fast.
I know we need, Carolyne, we need to do a round two and answer people's questions, because this has been so rich, so rich.
I just thank you for having me on. Yeah.
So great. So great to meet you in person and just bubble in your brilliance.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Carolyne, can you just talk, do you have in online classes, where can people find you? How can they support all the work that you're doing and continue to change the vocabulary for their people?
Well, thank you for that. So I have a website. It's the centerforwomensfitness.com. And I pivoted last year. I filmed every single course that I've ever taught. I have over 250 videos of exercises, all online. So they can find that through my Instagram page. You can look through my bio and it'll take you to the website. So
bio.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. You're doing great work. And like you said, we always have these conversations. Last week alone, we talked about leading from the middle. This is leading from the middle. This is, you're talking to your people, you're influencing them to challenge the way that they think and speak, and hope that they go home and then challenge their friends and people at the water cooler on the way that they think and speak. Right? So it's all good. It's all really good.
There's nothing bad about changing your position. Whether it's about what menopause looks like, whether it's about Botox in your appearance, whatever it is, pick one, pick something. Pick, I don't like to work heavy because I don't want to get big muscles, whatever it is. We really, really, just getting back to what Carolyne was saying earlier about menopause and just thinking about that, the way we frame things has to be a little bit more acceptable, accommodating,
Yes.
respectful of our own experiences as individuals in this world, right? I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's in my thoughts.
Absolutely.
I think
So much
respect
more
for
on us.
everybody in general. I think we need to be more gracious, more respectful.
Yes.
Take that breath before you speak. It doesn't matter what's in your head, but you've got to think of it, how the other person's going to react before you say something, not mean, but anything. I mean, just think beyond how you're feeling and think about everybody else as well, because we're all
Yeah.
connected,
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
Roxy has a compliment here for you. Your prenatal classes were the only ones that felt great on my body.
oh, thank you guys. That's so good to hear, because when you don't hear anything, right, you don't know if things are working. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
All right.
Beautiful.
Carolyne, I'm going to reach out to you afterwards. We're going to plan
Okay.
a round 2 for this, and let's continue the
I'd love that.
conversation. So it'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Misty.
much.
Lovely to meet
Thank
you.
you.
All
You as
right.
Thank you,
well.
everyone,
Take
for
care,
watching Misty.
everybody.
As always, it's
Okay.
fun. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.